3 years ago, I was standing in a lecture hall at the University of Michigan, teaching applied psychology, something I'd been doing for almost a decade. On the outside, I looked like the professor who had it all together, but on the inside, I was running on empty. That day, a student raised his hand. His voice was calm, but his question cut straight through me. "Professor Carter, if emotions are just predictions the brain makes, then why do we still feel heartbreak so deeply? If the brain can rewire itself, why can't you?" The whole room went silent, and in that moment, it felt like he'd ripped the mask right off my face. I was supposed to be the expert, the one teaching them how to manage stress and emotion. But the truth, I was drowning in anxiety and burnout. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. My heart was pounding out of my chest. My hands were shaking, and the only sound I heard was a whisper from the back row. "Guess she's no different than us." And right there, under those cold fluorescent lights, I broke down and cried. Not because I forgot some textbook answer, but because his question hit me where it hurt the most. My pride. How could I teach others about resilience when I could barely hold myself together? That was my wake-up call. You could say I finally hit rock bottom. And instead of brushing it under the rug, I made a decision. I had to get to the bottom of what was really happening in my body and my mind. That moment sent me on a journey, one that led to 5 simple changes that helped me climb out of anxiety and career burnout and rebuild my energy and purpose from the ground up. A few weeks after that humiliating moment in class, I was backstage at a packed university conference. My job was to give a keynote on stress and resilience. Ironic, I know. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold my notes. My heart was thumping so hard I thought the mic would pick it up. Here's the irony. I'd taught the theory of anxiety for years. I'd even cited research from neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett about how the body's stress response is just raw energy, waiting for the brain to label it. I knew the science, but standing there, seconds away from walking on stage, none of that mattered. My brain had only one label: panic. And then, almost like a lifeline, Barrett's words came back to me. Not from a textbook, but from memory, sharper than ever. Anxiety and determination feel exactly the same in your body. The only difference is the story you tell yourself about it. I closed my eyes, took one shaky breath, and whispered to myself, "This isn't panic. This is power. This is my body gearing up for the fight, not shutting down." When the spotlight hit, I didn't wait for the fear to go away. I walked straight into it. Every heartbeat felt like a drum driving me forward, not holding me back. My voice still shook at first, but instead of running from it, I let it carry me. And when I finished, something had shifted. The anxiety was still there, but it wasn't my enemy anymore. It was fuel. For the first time, I felt like I'd stepped into my own classroom as a student, finally learning the lesson I'd been teaching others for years. After that conference, you might think I was cured. Hardly. The stage didn't scare me as much anymore, but the everyday interactions did. A few weeks later, the psychology department held a cross-faculty mixer. Nothing fancy, just wine, cheese, and casual conversation in the lounge. For most professors, it was light networking. For me, it was a minefield. I stood by the coffee table, clutching a glass, when I heard laughter from across the room. A senior professor, someone whose work I'd once cited in my own lectures, was talking to a small circle. Then he saw me and smirked. Professor Carter, the expert on resilience. Tell us, what's the secret? How do you personally stay so calm under pressure? The group chuckled, waiting. My throat closed. I flashed back to that student's question. To my own breakdown, my brain screamed. They know. They all know you're a fraud. I could have excused myself, melted into the corner, but something inside me whispered, prediction, not prophecy. Test it. So I forced a smile, stepped into the circle, and said quietly, the truth, I don't always stay calm. In fact, not long ago, I almost quit teaching because I couldn't handle the panic. But I'm learning something important. Anxiety isn't the enemy, it's the signal. And when I treat it like energy, not weakness, that's when I show up stronger. The laughter stopped. One professor tilted his head. Another nodded slowly. Then the senior one, the very man who had smirked, said, that's actually quite profound. I walked out shaking, but not from shame this time, from relief. For years, my brain had predicted humiliation. Instead, I got respect. That tiny prediction error was like watching the prison bars bend. The next week, I stayed through an entire faculty meeting. A month later, I accepted a panel invitation. Each time, the fear whispered less, the walls crumbled more. And here's the science behind it. Exposure rewires prediction. Each safe encounter teaches the brain that its old forecast, humiliation, rejection, doesn't always come true. The neural pathways of fear weaken, and new ones grow stronger. For me, it wasn't about eliminating fear, it was about proving to myself, one uncomfortable step at a time, that fear was lying. The round table gave me hope, proof that maybe I wasn't as broken as I thought, but my body was still running on fumes. I was living on 3 cups of coffee before lunch, grabbing granola bars between classes, and sleeping maybe 4-5 hours a night. I told myself it was just the academic life. But really, my brain felt like a browser with 100 tabs open, all frozen, but still draining the battery. Then came the breaking point. It was January in Ann Arbor. The kind of winter morning where the snow blinds you and the air tastes like metal. I walked into lecture with a thermos of black coffee in one hand and a stack of notes in the other. Halfway through explaining cognitive reappraisal, my own research topic, my vision blurred. The words slipped out of reach, like they'd been erased from my brain. 50 pairs of eyes stared at me. I gripped the podium, trying to steady myself. But the dizziness was crushing. My heart wasn't racing this time. It felt like it was collapsing inward. I muttered something about taking a quick break and stumbled into the hallway. The blast of cold air hit me as I leaned against the wall, gasping, and one thought froze me harder than the snow outside. Am I having a heart attack at 39? That night, lying awake at 3 a.m., I remembered something Lisa Feldman Barrett once said. Your brain is the body's financial manager. Every choice you make is a deposit or a withdrawal. If the budget goes bankrupt, the system fails, and mine had failed. So I started embarrassingly small. I set a bedtime alarm for 3 p.m. and treated it like a class I couldn't skip. I stopped skipping breakfast and sat down with my husband and daughter. Real food, not vending machine junk. I unrolled a yoga mat 3 times a week, even if all I managed was 10 minutes of stretching and breathing. On Saturdays, I walked the icy trails along the Huron River until my lungs stung, reminding myself what it felt like to be alive inside my own body. It wasn't instant, but slowly. The fog lifted. The 3 p.m. crashes weren't as brutal. I could read a dense journal article without rereading the same line 5 times. I even caught myself laughing over pancakes with my daughter, something I hadn't had the energy for in months. Here's what I learned in the flesh, not just from textbooks. When your body's budget is bankrupt, anxiety and depression thrive. But when you invest with sleep, food, and movement, you build surplus energy to think, to feel, to connect. For the first time in years, I wasn't just dragging myself through life. I was present. Fixing my sleep and food gave me energy back. But one thing still haunted me: the loneliness. I had pulled away from dinners with colleagues. I scrolled endlessly on Facebook and Twitter, convincing myself I was staying connected. But really, it was like eating junk food for the soul. The more I scrolled, the more hollow I felt. One night, after grading papers until midnight, I padded down the dark hallway with my phone still glowing in my hand. That's when I noticed it, under my daughter's door. The light was still on. She had been waiting to say goodnight, and I hadn't even realized. Something broke inside me. I pushed her door open. She was curled up with a book, eyes heavy but still awake. "Mom," she whispered, "I thought you forgot me." Her words hit harder than any conference or classroom ever could. The next evening, I tried something different. I shoved my phone into the kitchen drawer like I was locking away a thief, grabbed a book, and walked into her room. "Sweetheart, want me to read with you before bed?" For a second, she just blinked at me, almost like she didn't believe it, and then her face lit up. She scooted over, patted the spot beside her, and handed me the book. So we sat there, shoulder to shoulder, her head resting against me, the pages turning softly in the quiet. No likes, no retweets, no audience. Just the rhythm of her breathing and the sound of her small voice reading aloud. And in that moment, something cracked open in me. Burnout had stolen my presence, even from the person who mattered most. But here she was, giving it back freely. No conditions, no judgment. Tears rolled down my cheeks before I even realized. That night, I slept deeper than I had in months. From there, I began choosing people over pixels. Instead of scrolling conference threads, I invited a colleague for coffee. Instead of tweeting about burnout, I admitted it face-to-face to a close friend. And every time, the weight lifted a little more. The science explained it perfectly. Humans are wired for connection. A single caring relationship can literally calm your nervous system, lower stress hormones, even balance your metabolism. My body wasn't just repairing through rest and food. It was repairing through love and belonging. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was carrying it all alone. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was sharing my life again. I thought the hardest battles were behind closed doors. I was wrong. The real reckoning came under the same cold lights that once watched me break. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I walked back into my applied psychology lecture hall, the very room where months earlier I had fallen apart in front of my students. The walls seemed taller, the air heavier, like the place itself remembered my collapse. For weeks, I'd carried that shame like a brand I couldn't wash off. Halfway through the lecture, as I scanned the rows of expectant faces, my throat tightened. My mind replayed the question that had shattered me before. If the brain can rewire itself, why can't you? The words echoed like a ghost in the room. My palms went icy. Every instinct screamed at me to smile, to push through, to hide. But instead, I did something unthinkable for me back then. I stopped pretending. I closed my notes, leaned against the podium, and said, "Let me tell you the truth. Last year, right here in this room, I thought I was finished. I had panic attacks before every class. I broke down in front of all of you because I believed it meant I was a fraud, that I was broken. But here's what I've learned. I'm not a victim of trauma. I'm not defined by anxiety. I'm a person learning, step by step, how to rebuild." The silence was thick. A student in the front row's eyes welled with tears. Another whispered, "That's me." And in that moment, I saw something shift. Not pity, not judgment, recognition, connection. For years, the story in my head had been, I'm broken, I don't belong here. But standing there, stripped of pretense, that narrative cracked wide open. I wasn't an imposter masquerading as a professor. I was a human being, showing, not teaching, what resilience really looks like. The science made sense later. When we speak our truth, it rewires prediction, not only in our own brains, but in those listening. Identity is not a fixed sentence. It's a story, and stories can be rewritten. That day, I walked out of the lecture hall lighter. The anxiety didn't vanish, but it no longer owned me. I was no longer the professor who broke down. I was no longer the victim of trauma. I was the teacher who turned her breakdown into a lesson worth passing on. Looking back now, I realize those 5 changes didn't just pull me out of burnout. They gave me a new way to live. I used to think resilience meant never cracking, but the truth, resilience is what happens after you crack. It's the way you rebuild, the story you choose to tell yourself, and the people you let in along the way. I'm no longer chasing the illusion of being the perfect professor. I'm practicing being a present human, a mother who laughs over pancakes, a colleague who shows up honestly, a teacher who admits she's still learning. And here's the part I want you to take with you. Change doesn't have to be massive to matter. Sometimes it's one breath backstage, one awkward step into a room, one honest confession to a student, one meal shared at the table. Those small shifts compound, and slowly, they rewrite your life. So I'll leave you with this. Which of these 5 changes have you tried? Or which one do you want to start with? Share your story, because when we open up, We don't just heal ourselves, we give others permission to heal too. If this message resonated with you, I'd love for you to join me here at The Truth MD. This is where we keep exploring real stories, real science, and real ways to find our way back to meaning. Your support, a like, a share, or even just subscribing, helps this community grow and maybe helps one more person realize they're not alone. Because the truth is, none of us are